Good morning. Welcome to our Thursday devotion and prayer time. My name is Tom Lemler. I'm the senior minister of the Deer Run Church of Christ in South Bend, Indiana, as well as the director of Impact Prayer Ministry. We're talking and praying this week about being generous and how God's desire for us to reflect His generosity ought to challenge and change the way that we view what being generous is. We ought to be transformed into the image of Christ more and more each day. And as I've talked about throughout this series and in the message this past Sunday, that being generous is a lot easier if we learn to focus on what it is we've kept rather than on what we've given. And this morning we're going to focus in on being generous in or under extreme circumstances. Those times of life when, our flesh is even more resistant because it doesn't really feel like we have anything to be generous with. And yet God asks us the same question that He would when we are in plenty. Have we given ourselves fully to Him? Are we willing to use whatever resources He's entrusted us with in the best way possible? 2 Corinthians 8, verse 2, Paul writes, he says, out of the most severe trial, their overflowing joy and their extreme poverty welled up in rich generosity. Not exactly terms you would think would fit together. Extreme poverty, severe trial, overflowing joy, generosity. It's when we recognize, Paul's writing about this group of believers who seems like kind of surprised him. He knew they wanted to help, but he also knew their circumstances. And perhaps had, in his mind, kind of written them off. Again, it reminds me of this story that Jesus relates to us. Luke relates to us it happening. Jesus observing, and a widow puts in 2 small coins. And Jesus declares that she has given more. Her generosity is greater than all of the others. Those who had given great sums of money with great fanfare, announcing to the crowds, "Look at me." And it's in that severe trial, that extreme poverty, that our decision to give is at times more reflective of the way that God gave to us in sacrificing His one and only Son. I think of the words of David as he desires to worship God and offer sacrifices to God. And in the place where he wants to do that, the owner wants to just give him the property, the supplies, all that is needed. And David's response is, I won't sacrifice to God something that costs me nothing. It's not really the point of sacrifice. And there are times in life when our severe trials and our extreme poverty makes us question whether we have anything to be generous with. But what I've discovered in my own life, and that generosity, when motivated by a heart of joy, filled with the Spirit of God, can take place regardless of how the world might evaluate our circumstances. And because God measures by the heart, because He measures more by looking at what's left than what's been given, we can rejoice. Whether anyone else thinks we're generous or not, that's not the point. It shouldn't be the point. As God looks upon our life, He notices our circumstances. Sometimes those circumstances are being used by God to shape us into what He wants us to be. Sometimes those circumstances are because we've just made some pretty poor decisions. Sometimes those circumstances is because someone else took advantage of us. But regardless of the cause, it's been a while since I've mentioned it, but Jesus promised, He stated, He declared, in this world you will have troubles, severe trials, extreme poverty, things you don't like, things that are hard and difficult. But take heart. I have overcome the world. I am with you always, even to the end of the ages. And so our overwhelming joy tempers the severe trials, the extreme poverty. It motivates us to give something. And out of that heart of generosity, God views a generous giver. And we would do well to let God do the evaluation. To not write someone off because it doesn't look like they have much to give. They very well may be giving more than anyone else. It's the heart. And when we choose and we ask God to transform our heart, to give us that heart of generosity, we're not going to let the trials of life, the circumstances of life, the poverty of this world's riches keep us from experiencing the joy of generosity. Would you spend some time today praying with me? Father, thank you that you are a God that loves us. In your love, you've given us the greatest example of generosity that ever existed. You gave your one and only Son, a sacrifice not only to you, but a sacrifice of himself to pay the penalty for our sin. And Father, it is my prayer that our hearts would be transformed as your children into hearts of generosity that measures, to the extent possible, a generosity based on giving ourselves wholly to you. And Father, may we consider generosity from your perspective rather than ours. Help us to find desire to practice those gifts of generosity, even when it feels like we have nothing left to give. And whether we're digging deeper into our finances or whether we're digging deeper into the love that you've put within us, may we be measured by you and not be found wanting, but be found obedient and submissive and joyful and filled with love. And so, God, as we consider all of this world's treasures, may they pale in comparison to the treasure of knowing Jesus, of walking with you. And so, Father, for those especially today who are experiencing those severe trials, for those in the midst of extreme poverty, may their needs be met. May they be supplied by your hand. Perhaps your hand extended through the generosity of others. But nonetheless, may it be known by them, the giver and the receiver, that you're the source. And Father, even as you work through the process of providing whatever need exists, may the heart of generosity dwell, and may it well up in extreme and overwhelming joy, so that Jesus would be made known. And regardless of, in spite of our circumstances, may we lift up Jesus, the one who helps us, the one who teaches us, the one who corrects us, the one who is the example of all things. That as we lift up him, that he would draw people to himself. It's in his name that I pray. Amen. This has been our Thursday devotion and prayer time. Thank you so much for joining me today. I do pray that your day is greatly blessed by God, so that you can be a blessing to others. Have a great day